Someone who was known sort of as the whisperer for federal employees, as she wrote it, had written a story about it, about posting on a page on Reddit where a lot of federal employees talk about their work. She listed her Signal info, and Signal has become this major.
4:51 a.m. Minneapolis, Minnesota. The city was frozen beneath layers of winter silence. Streets lay empty, windows dark. Not a single car moved through the downtown corridors. To the 437,000 residents sleeping inside, this was just another quiet Tuesday morning in a city known for its progressive values and welcoming policies. But inside a federal command center 3 blocks from City Hall, a crisis was unfolding in real time. Digital maps pulsed red across multiple screens, target locations marked with precision. The threat wasn't approaching. It was already embedded. For 11 months, FBI and IC agents had been tracking something that defied traditional patterns. A network operating inside the justice system itself, not around it, inside it. Reports flooded in from every corner of the state. Drug overdose deaths had surged 412% in targeted districts. Human trafficking cases had tripled. Armed violence had increased 289% in neighborhoods that were once considered safe. But what shocked investigators most was the financial hemorrhage. Auditors confirmed that $440 million in federal welfare funds had been diverted through fraudulent channels. Treasury officials feared the real number could exceed $700 million. The money wasn't disappearing randomly. It was being extracted with surgical precision. If you want to see how deep this corruption goes, hit like now so this story reaches every community that needs to know. Agents stood in silence, staring at the evidence wall. Every financial trail, every approval signature, every encrypted communication converged on a single location. The mayor's office of St. Louis Park, Minnesota. At the center of it all was Asha Mohammed Nure, age 44. Elected mayor in 2021 with overwhelming support. Approval rating once exceeded 71%. To the public, she represented integration, progress, and effective governance. She stood beside police chiefs promising safety. She cut ribbons at community centers funded by federal grants. She gave speeches about immigrant success stories and the American dream. But if the intelligence was accurate, she wasn't protecting America. She was exploiting it. Behind closed doors, Mayor Nure had constructed something far more dangerous than a criminal enterprise. Between January 2023 and December 2024, she initiated a parallel administrative structure that mirrored the city's legal framework but answered only to her. Using executive authority, she approved directives that bypassed standard oversight. The result was the creation of 29 shell companies registered as logistics firms, sanitation services, and consulting agencies. None had legitimate employees. None performed actual services. Through these entities, 1,150 individuals with violent criminal backgrounds were quietly embedded into the community using forged identification documents. These individuals were not integrated immigrants seeking opportunity. They were operatives. Between 1 a.m. and 4:30 a.m. every night, surveillance teams recorded 192 vehicle departures from targeted residential zones. No license plates, no traffic stops. Street cameras went dark for exactly 11 minutes during each convoy. At the center of this operation was a partnership that stunned federal investigators. Mayor Nure had aligned herself with CJNG, Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generation, one of the most violent criminal organizations in the Western Hemisphere. The terms were brutally simple: protection in exchange for profit. Over a span of 24 months, the network moved 9,700 pounds of fentanyl and heroin with an estimated black market value exceeding $440 million. Distribution was staged for a late winter surge targeting 23 cities across the Midwest. Silence was bought. Oversight mechanisms were systematically disabled. Local police received anonymous tips steering them away from critical locations. This was not an immigration debate. This was an infiltration. A hostile structure operating inside the American system faster than federal surveillance could dismantle it. Comment exposed below if you believe corrupt officials should face maximum consequences. At 5:57 a.m., the situation inside the Minnesota Federal Command Center shifted instantly. Surveillance ended. Enforcement began. All units, execute immediately. In a coordinated strike, 1,175 federal agents were mobilized across 5 states. The FBI, DEA, IC, and U.S. Marshals moved in perfect synchronization. Roads were sealed. Armored convoys advanced from prepositioned staging points near Interstate 394. Helicopters lifted off from secure facilities. Rotors cutting through the frozen darkness. Operational data poured in through secure channels. 26 locations were confirmed as high-risk targets. Warehouses in industrial zones. Apartments in residential neighborhoods. offices in commercial districts. Live intelligence identified 129 violent offenders already in defensive positions. At 5:59 a.m., surveillance cameras captured an individual exiting the rear entrance of Mayor Nure's administrative building, carrying a secured data storage device. Moving with urgency. Inside the lead command vehicle, radios crackled. Target is mobile. Intercept authorized. Unmarked trucks began rolling. The fight did not unfold as a single strike. It erupted as a synchronized collapse. Between 6:01 a.m. and 6:15 a.m., the network was hit at 41 separate points across Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Nebraska, and Nevada. In Wisconsin, the first breach set the operational tone. Within 4 minutes of entry, tactical teams neutralized Abdi Rahman, age 38, a veteran enforcer responsible for coordinating night convoys and disciplining operatives who failed to meet quotas. He attempted to trigger a data wipe protocol while firing from a stairwell landing. He was taken down at 6:04 a.m. Nevada units reported contact at a fake tax service front. Hassan Ledgermi, age 42, the cartel's primary money handler. He attempted escape carrying encrypted ledgers and $180,000 in cash. He was captured after a foot chase lasting 312 seconds. Inside the building, agents seized $4.2 million in bundled currency and 19 burner phones programmed to international numbers. The violence escalated in northern Minnesota. At a rural compound outside Bemidji, federal teams encountered fortified resistance. 3 armed sentries opened fire from elevated positions behind reinforced barriers. After a 7-minute engagement, the perimeter was breached. Inside the compound, agents discovered 512 pounds of synthetic narcotics packaged for distribution. 5 industrial pill presses capable of producing 80,000 tablets per hour. Packaging material sufficient to produce over 11 million doses. Fentanyl so potent that 2 milligrams could kill an adult. Analysts later confirmed the drugs were scheduled for distribution across 14 metropolitan areas within 10 days. Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, Indianapolis, Milwaukee. If you want to see more of these networks exposed and destroyed, hit the subscribe button right now. On interstate routes, interdiction teams closed the trap with precision. At 6:09 a.m., armored SUVs boxed in a transport vehicle near the Iowa corridor. The driver attempted to ram through the blockade. He was disabled within seconds. Inside were 118 unregistered firearms, AR-15 variants with filed serial numbers, modified handguns, ammunition in quantities sufficient for sustained combat, encrypted radios programmed to law enforcement frequencies. They were listening to police communications in real time. By 6:12 a.m., command data showed the scale of the collapse. 1,380 suspects detained nationwide. 9,700 pounds of narcotics seized. $46.8 million in cash frozen across 87 bank accounts. But the final blow landed quietly. At 6:15 a.m., agents intercepted Amina Sulman, age 39, Mayor Nure's chief administrative officer and primary fixer. She was attempting to exit a secured building with a hard drive containing approval chains, financial records, and encrypted communications linking the entire operation directly back to the mayor's office. Her arrest tied every thread together. When the gunfire stopped, the truth was undeniable. This was not a street gang dismantled by luck. It was a hostile infrastructure dismantled by force. And in 14 minutes, it was gone. Type yes below if you believe justice is worth fighting for no matter who it exposes. By 8:12 a.m., the scope of what had happened in Minnesota reached Washington, D.C. Overnight briefings turned into emergency cabinet sessions. This was no longer a local takedown. It was a national security crisis with implications that reached far beyond one mayor's office. Within 6 hours, federal auditors ordered the immediate suspension of funding to 312 nonprofit organizations connected to the Minnesota network. By noon, that number grew to 470. On paper, they served refugees, provided job training, offered language classes, distributed food assistance. In reality, investigators believe $2.3 billion had been diverted over a 4-year period. Treasury officials warned that the true exposure could approach $7 billion, one of the largest domestic financial abuses in United States history. But what alarmed federal officials even more was the pattern. By early afternoon, analysis units flagged 17 additional cities showing identical warning markers. The same funding structures, the same nonprofit shells, the same approval signatures bypassing oversight. Minnesota was not the origin. It was the proof of concept. At 6:41 p.m., a development shifted the investigation trajectory again. Technicians accessing the recovered server found metadata pointing outward. multiple states, multiple timelines, multiple officials. The threat was no longer outside the system. It was inside it. At 7:30 a.m. the following morning, the Attorney General authorized a Federal Integrity Task Force. Their mandate was unprecedented. Identify and neutralize internal enablers without regard for rank, tenure, or political affiliation. Within 72 hours, analysts matched approval signatures across state and federal databases. The same names appeared in 11 states. Records showed that 29 public officials had been directly bribed to delay audits, reroute inspections, or suppress investigation. Another 46 were flagged for willful negligence. Comment justice below if you believe every corrupt official should be prosecuted to the fullest extent. One of the first arrests occurred without media fanfare. A former federal prosecutor, once praised for his integrity and commitment to immigrant communities, taken into custody at his suburban home at 6:20 a.m. Evidence revealed he had blocked at least 14 grand jury subpoenas linked to nonprofit oversight investigations. His actions delayed federal intervention long enough for nearly $600 million to vanish into offshore accounts. The financial counterstrike was decisive. Treasury enforcement teams froze $9.6 billion in assets across domestic and international accounts. Shell companies collapsed overnight. Wire transfers were halted mid-transaction. The cash flow that sustained the network did not slow. It stopped. The investigation revealed a chilling operational truth. The network didn't fear law enforcement. It feared attention. For years, it had bought silence, not with threats, with money. Payments disguised as consulting fees, campaign contributions, speaking honorariums, real estate deals structured to avoid scrutiny. The internal purge was not dramatic. There were no press conferences, no public statements, just files opened, doors closed, careers ended. But the message was unmistakable. For the first time in years, the system had turned inward with lethal focus. If you believe this kind of accountability should happen in every state, share this video now. The operation in Minnesota dismantled a network, but it exposed a vulnerability that handcuffs alone could not solve. No single official could have built such a system alone. It survived because 1,800 routine administrative actions went unquestioned over 5 years. Approvals rubber-stamped, audits postponed, inspections waived. The human cost was impossible to ignore. Health agencies confirmed that the fentanyl distribution linked to this network coincided with over 6,400 overdose deaths across multiple states. Families buried children. Parents buried teenagers. Communities aged overnight from grief that arrived without warning. In Cleveland, a mother found her 19-year-old son unresponsive in his bedroom. A single pill. Thought it was a painkiller prescribed by a doctor. It was fentanyl pressed in a basement connected to Mayor Nure's network. In Detroit, a father discovered his daughter collapsed in a bathroom stall. She was 22. Nursing student. No history of drug use. One mistake. One pill. Gone. These were not statistics. These were families destroyed by a system that prioritized profit over safety. This was never a story about a single city. It was about unchecked authority, about systems designed for trust being exploited by those who understood that trust rarely comes with verification. As the final investigative report was filed, one retired FBI agent summarized the lesson in a single sentence. Democracy doesn't fail loudly. It fails quietly when no one is watching. The streets of St. Louis Park are quiet again. Snow covers the sidewalks. Lights glow in windows. Families go about their routines. But something else has been awakened. A recognition that freedom is not preserved by promises. It is preserved by oversight, by vigilance, by citizens who refuse to look away. Mayor Asha Nure was arrested at 8:47 a.m. on February 6, 2025, charged with racketeering, conspiracy to distribute narcotics, money laundering, and public corruption. She did not resist. She did not speak. She was led from her office in handcuffs while cameras captured every moment. Her bail was set at $50 million. Denied. Prosecutors argued she posed an extreme flight risk with access to international criminal networks and offshore financial resources. The trial is scheduled to begin in August 2025. Federal prosecutors are seeking a sentence of life without parole. If convicted on all charges, she will spend the rest of her life in federal prison. Comment your reaction below if you believe she deserves the maximum penalty. The 29 shell companies were dissolved by federal order. Assets seized. Bank accounts frozen. Every dollar traced. The 1,150 individuals embedded into the community through fraudulent documentation were detained. 892 face federal charges. 258 were deported immediately. The $440 million in narcotics seized represented the largest single drug bust in Minnesota history. The $46.8 million in cash recovered was returned to federal programs designed to assist legitimate refugees and vulnerable communities. But the damage spreads deeper than numbers. Trust inside institutions weakened. Communities questioned who they could believe. Families wondered if their neighbors were who they claimed to be. This was betrayal wearing the face of public service. The investigation continues. Federal agents are now examining 17 additional cities flagged for identical patterns. The same non-profit structures, the same approval bypasses, the same financial anomalies. Investigators believe this network extended far beyond Minnesota. They believe Mayor Nure was not the architect. She was a regional manager. The real architects remain unidentified, protected by layers of shell corporations, encrypted communications, and international borders. But for the first time, the system is fighting back. Hit like if you believe every city in America should undergo this level of scrutiny. The lesson is clear. When public officials prioritize ideology over integrity, when systems reward compliance over accountability, when oversight is dismissed as discrimination, the vulnerable suffer most. This network didn't target the wealthy. It targeted working families, struggling neighborhoods, communities already facing challenges. It exploited the very people it claimed to serve. And it used America's compassion as a weapon against itself. The 6,400 overdose deaths linked to this network were not accidents. They were not inevitable. They were the direct result of decisions made by individuals who placed profit above human life. Every pill pressed in those basements had a destination. A teenager experimenting at a party. A college student managing exam stress. A worker dealing with chronic pain. One pill. One mistake. One family destroyed forever. If this story angers you, comment never again below. The Attorney General has announced the creation of a permanent task force dedicated to investigating public corruption tied to immigration fraud and drug trafficking network. It will operate across all 50 states. It will have authority to investigate elected officials at every level of government without prior approval. It will prioritize financial audits of nonprofits receiving federal funding. The message is unmistakable. The era of unchecked exploitation is over. But the responsibility doesn't rest solely with federal agents. It rests with every citizen who chooses awareness over apathy, with every voter who demands transparency, with every community member who asks questions instead of accepting narratives. The network in Minnesota survived for years because people didn't want to look. They didn't want to ask uncomfortable questions. They didn't want to be accused of bias or prejudice, so they stayed silent. And silence became complicity. Subscribe now so you don't miss updates as this investigation expands into other states. The streets are quiet again, but the fight continues. Across America, federal agents are examining financial records, tracing wire transfers, interviewing witnesses. They are dismantling networks that believed they were untouchable. They are proving that no one is above the law. Not mayors, not prosecutors, not community leaders who weaponize identity to shield corruption. Justice is not selective. It is universal. And when it arrives with force. The families who lost loved ones to fentanyl poisoning will never recover what was stolen. No arrest can bring back a child. No prison sentence can undo grief. But accountability sends a message. It tells other corrupt officials that their time is limited. It tells criminal networks that America is not a safe haven. It tells vulnerable communities that they deserve protection, not exploitation. If you believe justice is worth fighting for, share this story with everyone you know. This is only the beginning. More cities will be exposed. More officials will be arrested. More networks will collapse under the weight of federal scrutiny. The question is not whether corruption exists. The question is whether we have the courage to confront it. Mayor Asha Mohammed Nure built an empire on lies. She betrayed her oath. She betrayed her community. She betrayed every value she claimed to represent. And now she will pay the price. The system is watching. The system is fighting back. And the vigilance that was missing has finally returned. Stay vigilant.